Let's talk about organisms that glow in the dark. I already introduced you to the Firefly Petunia, but that's just one example, and there are loads of other ones. And it's kind of an interesting topic, especially when you start looking at how it might pertain to some of our garden topics. And I just happen to know a guy who, number one, he is totally into bioluminescence. Number two, he also grows and experiments with glow-in-the-dark flowers. And he's also an avid gardener and educator. So kind of the perfect person to have this conversation with. And then I'm going to invite you in on that call. And then afterwards, I'm going to give you a little insight into some research that I did myself. So in my last video about the Firefly Petunia, I didn't have any idea what it would cost if you bought it from a local retailer. Well, I contacted over 80 retailers who will be selling the Firefly Petunia, and I have some information for you guys on how much it's going to cost and what size you can get it for. So I'm going to warn you, the conversation that we have, I'm going to bet it's going to get a little sciencey. So if at any point it's kind of not a topic that's not your jive, not really what you're looking for, you're welcome to just skip ahead. I'll put the timestamp right here so you can just fast forward to that part and get to the information about the pricing if that's what you're most interested in. So let's go make a video call. I'd like to introduce you all to my friend Rick Boyd. He teaches at Marquette University, and he happens to have a little penchant for, well, living organisms that glow. Isn't that right, Rick?
That is right.
Well, I'm very curious because I want to talk about, of course, the glowing petunia, the firefly, but even before the firefly came out, you had been telling me about these other things that glow. So glowing does occur in nature.
Right, it does. And so the bioluminescence is a fascinating topic, and part of the courses that I teach at the university have aspects of science, sometimes physics, some biology, some chemistry that I roll together. Some of my students are not science majors, and so I try to share with them. For example, I care for tropical frogs, the Boana frogs, that actually are fluorescent under a black light naturally. I also have some of the genetically modified axilotls that are fluorescing and glow under black light.
Okay, I had you with frogs, but axolotl?
Right, the axilotls are the ones that look kind of like salamanders with foofy gills. And the scientists years ago have used bioengineering, genetically modifying them by putting a deep sea green fluorescent protein from a deep sea jellyfish into axolotls so that they glow under black light. Because axolotls, believe it or not, are masters of regeneration. They can regrow their spinal cord, their limbs, parts of their brain, their organs. And what they want to do is be able to see the stem cells that sprout under black light under the microscope and try to figure out how can they do that. So what if humans could regrow our spinal cords and grow limbs?
So whatever the new growth is going to glow under that black. Makes it easier to know what's new and
but
what's
I promise mine are actually demonstrator pets. I don't do experiments on them. They're just really cool and they glow under black light. But then there are these petunias where, as you know, with the Firefly Petunias, those are bioluminescent, where they genetically modified those with the gene from the tropical mushrooms to get the petunias to glow. But there are also bioluminescent algae that I also happen to culture as I teach the physics of light in nature. And those are 100% natural algae that glow if you have to.
This is what it's like visiting Rick. He has a jar with, like, looks kind of just plain, and then he turns off all the lights and shakes it, and all of a sudden they start to glow like crazy. So
and then you turn around while the lights are off, and then you say, oh my gosh, there are petunias that are glowing. And oh, now there's some multicolored ones that are glowing.
Like, why would these species glow, though? Like, is it something that helps them? We know that you said the axolotl was genetically modified, but like you mentioned a couple of things.
The Boana frogs, they have concluded those naturally glow under black light, but they also glow under full moon light and twilight. And they figure that they're about 29% brighter in that dim lighting in the jungle where they would normally be from in Central America, and they can apparently see each other better to look for mates at twilight and full moonlight. So
it's better lighting for the romantic.
That's right. But then with the bioluminescent algae, you sometimes see the the video clips of the waves crashing on the beach in California or the lagoons in Central America, Caribbean area. Those, it's pretty cool. It's a single-celled little microalgae. And by the way, I also teach the students the wonders of it. They now calculate microalgae worldwide, green ones, pale brown ones, everything else. They give us 50 to 70% of the oxygen we breathe in. So microalgae are quite valuable worldwide, but there's that really cool strain that originally was found and does exist off the shores of San Diego. And what happens is they get eaten by little brine shrimp in the ocean at night. And so what they've evolved is they sense the pressure changes on their cell walls. So the physics of that crunching by the brine shrimp, they flash. And the flashing mechanism is bioluminescence, and that's like the burglar alarm. And that attracts fish that are attracted to the flash, just like fish are attracted to a fishing lure. And the fish come over to see the flash, and they see the little brine shrimp. They eat the brine shrimp, and then the rest of the floating algae tends to not be eaten.
Oh, so it is, like you said, a burglar alarm, but it actually doesn't call the police. It calls like
the fish.
The serial killer.
The fish are the police that come over to investigate, and then they eat the little brine shrimp, and then the rest of the algae are doing well. So I culture those now for students as a take-home experiential lab. And then they do some science experiments and journals and play around with them at night about an hour after bedtime and play sound systems with physics of music and sound waves, and they flash to the music, and it's pretty cool.
Is it the vibrations of the sound that they're responding to?
Right, because the sound waves and the vibrations. In their case, it has to do with pressure changes. Petunias,
so we have disco algae.
Petunias just are actually glowing 24/7. We just don't know it unless they're in the dark.
So the petunias did not come by this naturally,
right.
though.
So the Firefly people shared that they were able to put the genetics of a glowing tropical mushroom into petunias simply because they thought it'd be cool to have something that's bioengineered that could glow. And they, somewhat recent years, had problems where it would sort of fizzle out, but they were able to unlock the mechanism to have the glowing chemicals keep regenerating. So, yeah.
I also read somewhere like earlier versions of this, they had to actually feed the plants certain food in order for them to glow as well. So these just normal, like they just have to be healthy.
Right, they have to be healthy to glow, and they you don't have to like wait until nighttime for them to glow. They'll glow. It's just that it's usually too bright, or like you shared in your other video, the Firefly original petunias. People should need to be aware if they have street lights or patio lights and things like that. What I have experienced with my own that I've been growing is that growing them in a pot works out really well, because then depending on what you're doing with guests and with patio versus bring them inside to the bathroom or put them on your nightstand at night like I do as a nightlight, then it's really cool.
Well, let's talk about the nightlight, because how bright is it? Like, what are you getting off of yours?
I don't recall if I shared pictures with you already. Oh, regarding pictures, I can share. I have some pictures that I've taken with my iPhone with my hand right over it, and you can actually see my hand, and you can see the glowing. So the challenge is that I think most people, and I have experienced, you have to be in a dark room for about 5 minutes for your pupils to dilate enough to actually really see it easily. And so if people are, like you shared in your video, if they're just walking along, they might not notice, or if there's background light pollution, so to speak. But in a bedroom, for example, bringing the pot away from my grow lights into the bedroom on the nightstand, within 5 minutes, I can tell it's there, and it's definitely beautiful. So wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and it's like, whoa, there's this glowing 3D thing there, and it's really very noticeable then when your pupils are fully dilated. Yeah.
And you had mentioned to me before that people are finding ways to make them glow even more.
I have been participating in the Facebook group about the Firefly Petunias, and I know one of the individuals there. I don't know him personally, but he's been experimenting with certain types of powdered amino acids being added to the Jack's fertilizer and trying to enhance the uptake and then enhance the glow so they glow even better. And so I quite often use the Jacks with the amino acid powder mixed in to get better.
Okay, so when you say amino acid powders, I'm thinking I have to go to a lab and find my amino acid dealer?
Yeah, no, you
Or-
can actually just buy them like at Amazon.com. So the amino acid is just powdered tyrosine, and some people take it for various types of nutritional reasons and things like that. So it's called L-Tyrosine. It comes in a little capsule, and the gentleman on the Facebook group has shared with people 2 capsules per gallon of the Jack's fertilizer mixed with water.
Okay.
Adding two.
And how often?
Pardon?
How often is that?
He recommends doing it like every time if you want to. I've been doing it here and there and here and there, and I haven't actually done a very controlled experiment of exactly this one with and without. He's just mentioned that generally you get better glow. I'm still getting good glow even without this, but I find it fascinating in terms of that the tyrosine could be something. Who knew an amino acid powder? It helps with nutrient uptake in plants.
Well, it makes me wonder too, is it going to benefit our regular petunias as well? Are they going to be taking up more nutrients as well?
Right.
Sorry, we've got a storm right now going on, so I might be looking a little funny as, and the power could go out, but you might be able to hear the rain hitting the roof of the greenhouse.
Sure.
So apologize for any strange noises or flashing lights. We've got some additives that you mentioned, but you also said something about a Facebook group. Is this like a secret glowing petunia society?
No, it's I just found it. I believe it's a public group, or maybe there was a minimal question or two to get into it, but it's the Facebook hobby groups. It's called Firefly Petunia something or other. And so there's a gentleman that's been in that one that has posted some information. I believe he's doing even more research right now somewhere. I don't even know what part of the world he lives in, but I believe he's experimenting with some other types of powdered amino acids. But this is the one that he posted on there and said, hey, garden growers, you may want to add this in with your Jack's Petunia fertilizer. I'm not using it all the time, but once in a while, if I remember, I'll throw it in. And so, like I said, I'm finding
it's not hurting them so far, right?
Definitely not. Right. Yeah. So.
Anything else you notice as you're growing these petunias that maybe make them a little different from other plants?
Definitely. And that's one other comment that I've noticed in that group. Other gardeners that started with these petunias a year ago, which is when I started with them, is that we're finding that the original Firefly, like you have mentioned originally, they may have had some growth type of inhibiting hormones and stayed compact, but these that I've continued to grow and grow from cuttings, and by the way, the vendor has given me permission to keep on propagating them for educational purposes. I'm not allowed to sell them and make money off of them that way and all of that, but I can propagate them for educational purposes. So, for example, this one I grew from cuttings, and it's now, more than a year past when I got the original ones, but they still have an extremely tight growth pattern, so much so that sometimes the center part gets the donut effect and it actually has been smothered and so forth. So it's to me, it seems like they have this part of their genetics with the original recipe Firefly that tends to be quite dense, and therefore that's why in that some of these Facebook group commentary people have said, yeah, it's important to trim off these flowers after a while, because otherwise everything starts to die back underneath and you end up with a bunch of stalks.
Okay, because it's not getting longer. So
they're slowly getting longer, but they tend to pile up so many flowers on top of themselves that they sort of smother the lower.
That was my observation, that as long as we were giving it a lot of fertilizer, it really did produce a good number of blooms.
Right.
And funny you mentioned the donut effect, because one of mine was very donutty, but the other two weren't. So I kind of figured the one that was the oddball might have it might have cracked at some point or might have been misbehaving. Right. But the other two seemed to be pretty full most of the time. And we actually didn't do much trimming, and they actually got a decent size, but then winter came and I didn't winter them over.
And what I had, some of my original ones did what you described. But then once I started to trim it back a little bit more, then I realized how much of it was literally dead and brown in the center. And then I find that sometimes if they've gone that far and if you cut them down that low to the sort of almost bare stalks, they seem to really struggle with resprouting.
So you don't want to do it more regularly rather than one big harsh trip. Okay, well, that's good to know. Any other observations?
Well, the part of the observation was part of my curiosity with science experimenting with them and pollination. Should I get into any of that?
I've seen what you've been doing with
Okay.
these petunias, and I'm curious to hear how you go about doing it. What's the story? Because I've never really propagated petunias. I've started some from seed for the first time,
Sure.
so I'm new on
Okay.
this. So
Well,
educate
the
me.
part of the science coursework that I do in developing extra units within the curriculum is I'm realizing perhaps a generation or so before, people would sometimes be in elementary school and they would plant a bean seed and it would be in a little
Yep.
like milk carton, and then they learn how beans sprout and then they grow and then they take them home in like May, June, and then they try to plant them in the garden. And what I think would be cool for my students, as I'm trying to help them have an interest in science and it's not so scary, would be what if they could plant some bioluminescent generating petunia seeds at the start of the semester, and it happens to have a short enough cycle that by the end of the semester they could potentially have little plants that are just starting to bloom, some of which might actually start to actually glow, and it would be kind of a neat modern version of the green bean in the milk carton kind of an idea. So what I also wondered when I teach parts of the basics of genetics and Punnett squares, dominant recessive, is I wonder if these could set seed and if the seeds would be fertile. But what if I found a regular, ordinary, two-toned kind of a petunia that had a lighter area and a darker area? I wondered if I could try pollinating those and see what that would do, dominant, recessive, fertile, or not. So what I did last summer is I found some ordinary type non-bioluminescent petunias that had some lighter areas and some darker areas on them. And I took the pollen from those and pollinated them onto the fireflies. And I was thrilled that a lot of seed pods were generated.
Okay.
So that was a good step. Then,
but were they viable?
right,
That's the
were
big
they
question.
viable? So I brushed up on my green thumb with being viable because those seeds are so tiny if they're not pelleted. And so I was able to use some really finely ground germination mix kind of a thing, surface sowing them, and it turned out that they were viable. And on the very first night that the little leaves would pop up out of the ground, about 80% of them would glow. So I was thrilled that I was able to get seeds, the seeds were fertile, and about 80% of the seedlings would glow.
And so these would be the leaves that are coming up that are
just
glowing.
Two little leaves, you know, as big as like the head of a pin, but I could see them glowing right from day one of popping out of the ground, and that was fun.
Okay, so that is like science that you can get excited.
Oh yeah,
like,
right.
Your heart skips a beat just seeing when your seeds germinate, but when they glow, like that's like a whole nother level.
So it's like, you know, about the size of black pepper corns, you know, ground up. That's how tiny those little leaves are. But it's like, oh my gosh, there's like 30 little dots that are glowing. So what I did is I then culled out the ones that didn't glow. And I decided to keep raising about whatever I said, 80% or something of the ones that did glow. And so then the question was, I wonder if this is dominant or recessive. And therefore I thought, okay, it might all be that all of this glowingness is recessive and it gets covered over with dominant recessive genes. But I'm thrilled that the ones that do glow with their leaves, also if they have light colored parts of the flowers, those also glow. So one of the ones that I found when I was looking for a donor of pollen happened to be a type of petunia that I found, and it had this sort of a starburst pattern on the original ordinary petunia. So I grabbed its pollen, and this is now one of the offspring. So the parent is the white firefly, and this child seedling, the white parts glow at night, but during the day, it looks like a really cool petunia plant. But I'm thrilled that it has sort of this sunrise kind of a pattern on it, like the original pollen donator one that I found as I was walking along, if that makes sense.
Now, when it comes to the firefly, just the standard one, can it pollinate itself?
Yes.
Or
I've done that as well. And and so far, all of the offspring, in my case anyway, were all white. A couple of them had a little bit of a two-tone darkness, lightness to the glowing part, but otherwise all of the offspring were all white. The other thing that I'm thrilled of the genetics is you can maybe tell that, and there's some variability. So on a given plant, some of them have more or less. I've noticed that on some of these. But the other part is they tend to have a looser pattern of growth, which...
So they're kind of taking the growth habit from the other
parent. From the normal parent, if you will, or the non-glowing one, I should say.
So potentially we could have a glowing, like giant, super vigorous type of firefly that could get 30 inches.
Well, what I'm hoping to do is, I saw on a previous video about that one type of petunia that is the really long one. I've forgotten the name of it.
Tickled pink, I think.
Tickled pink, right?
Was it tickled pink? Yeah.
So now my thought is to grow some tickled pink, and then pollinate the firefly with the tickled pink, and see if there can be a really long or trailing version of that. So then the other part that's pretty cool is this is another sibling plant of that same pollination, and the flowers
that's a nice, like rich kind of wine.
Right, it's a very wine cranberry color in real life. Beautiful to look at anyway. But I even double checked last night, and by the way, you can see it's more of an upright kind of a petunia habit. But it was really cool last night because you can imagine all these flowers at night, they look like black flying saucers, but the stalks glow underneath them. So it looks really cool to go like this at night, and you've got these glowing stalks with these black flying saucers above them. So that's kind of cool too.
Basically, like, you don't know what you're going to get when you're doing this, and you've had some pretty pleasant surprises.
Yes, very much so.
Aside from just the novelty of it, what might be some of the benefits of, say, a glow-in-the-dark plant? Like, what are some of the things that run through your mind?
Well, one interesting thing is that, and I know of some other people that are involved with bee research. And so one of the questions is, as I mentioned, these glow 24/7. We can only notice it when it's nighttime. But as you might be aware, pollinating bees, we believe, perceive various other patterns like infrared and other things that might be reflecting off of the flowers that we cannot see with our human eyes. So the question that could be an interesting curiosity is, do these bioluminescent glowing petunia plants, do they turn out to be more attractive or less attractive to pollinating bees, let's say?
Yeah, and does it confuse them, or does it appeal to them?
Like, whoa, then, right.
Yeah. And then thinking beyond the bees, we start thinking like, will that put regular plants at a disadvantage if they all go to the, but there, you said there probably hasn't been a lot of research on this.
To my knowledge, there hasn't been any so far. And the other part that I do know that I've read that the FDA approval for the Firefly, part of that concern, and I can appreciate that with other gardeners' concerns, do they glow so brightly that they'll confuse the nighttime insects? And I believe the regulators said, no, they don't. They're not that bright, which you and I know. And so, no, it's not like it's confusing the nighttime pollinators. But it could be interesting if it's just enough of a glow that it attracts them. Who knows?
Yeah. There's a lot of conversation that can go on, and a lot of research that can go on with these. I mean, a lot of people, I think, were originally buying these because they were picturing them in place of a nightlight or that type of thing, and they were disappointed in that. But I wonder if they will eventually be able to get to that point.
Well, I've read that the vendor is working even more on the recycling of the nutrients of the glowing mechanism, that they're anticipating in the next several years they'll have even brighter versions that they'll be releasing. I have read that in several different ways. The other part that I would share with people, if they're thinking of, like you shared on your other video, now Home Depot as well as other private centers are selling them. I would suggest, again, grow them in a pot. So then depending on how your garden is doing and what the lighting happens to be, you can move them to a different spot that is darker. Or if you want people to be able to sit for 5 minutes in the dark, then having it in a 1-gallon pot or something like that, I think could be better than putting it right in the ground and say, oh, drat, it's a little bit too bright with the background light pollution, and now I'm
You're not going to go out with some tent that you're going to cover
Right,
up so that
yeah.
you can enjoy it.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Sit there with it with a cardboard box over you. Yeah, right. Yeah. You could do that. It would work.
I suppose it would, but you imagine your neighbors seeing
Right.
you like on the ground with a cardboard box over your
Yeah.
head in the garden.
Right.
They might be concerned. So what's next for you and the Firefly Petunia?
I'm anticipating for my own use and the educational use is some of these color patterns of the multicolored ones that I like. Next, I'm already starting to just propagate some of those from cuttings, so I have some backup plants, that kind of a thing. But then I'm curious now, as we get into the summertime in Wisconsin, is to see how bright they are or are not outside, because these, of course, have been all growing inside during the winter under grow lights. And then, as I shared with you, I'd like to be able to then help to encourage more students to be curious about these things. So my own agenda of the educational front curriculum updates is to build out eventually perhaps more botany components into my existing mix that I'm allowed to use where I'm teaching the courses with the different areas of science, and help students to learn more about not only the bioluminescence, but also just, pollination, germination, propagation, with some cool stuff.
Even in the conversation we had, we started talking about nutrient uptake, which is something that the average person doesn't think about. We think about fertilizing, but we don't realize what that really means. And the fact that sometimes our plants can't get the nutrients that they need without some help.
And I would say I learned about the Jax fertilizer through that Facebook group. And
And are you using the Jax Petunia feed? Is that
yes, the Petunia feed. And to me, because of my green thumb through the last 40, 50 years, I'm amazed at how good the nutrient uptake appears to be with that. And no, I'm not a paid advertiser and all that stuff, but it's like, wow, these petunias, as far as the way it apparently can tweak and make sure it has the right soil pH, it's amazing how much they grow in a 2 or 3 day period with that stuff, that they really have that dialed in for petunias to really do a great job on the nutrient uptake.
And generally people will use like the bloom booster type of fertilizers on petunias. They don't realize that actually with petunias, it's more of that nitrogen, because the petunias usually put a flower at the end of each stem. So the more growth nodes they have, the more flowers they have. Whereas when we're looking at other plants, they send up a separate bloom stalk. And so that phosphorus helps those. So it is interesting. I know some science stuff. I do.
You do.
Well, and it helps when I grow stuff, So, but yeah. Well, this has really been interesting. I appreciate you taking the time to kind of talk to us a little bit more about this. There is a lot of buzz about it, and there's all these mixed reactions about the cost and all that kind of stuff. But I think the fact that there's an education component to it, I think does add some value, I think, to it, at least for me.
Great.
And the fact that we're talking about also fertilizer and how to take care of your plants folded into this conversation, I think there's a lot of value in that.
Thank you.
And I want more college students knowing how to grow stuff too, because for a while hasn't been happening as much.
I'm with you 1,000%, and that's why I'm thrilled in this past year of other college students that know and have seen me with these, just the interest that they have in that. And in a number of cases, there have been comments that, they grew up not having a backyard vegetable garden, not having a grandpa like I did that was always growing vegetables and growing this and that. They didn't have any of that. And so there's this thirst for that. And it's nice to have something kind of cool to catch their attention too. Yeah.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for spending this time. And
you're welcome.
I'm going to be checking in with you regularly because this is interesting. Just in general, Rick sends me, all his little interesting plant and frog and axolotl information. And it's always something that I didn't know about before.
Right.
And I have talked about some of this stuff at parties. I don't know if it was a hit at the party or not, but I felt pretty good talking about it.
Thanks. Thank you for asking me to join you today. I've enjoyed it as well.
Well, we'll talk to you soon.
All right.
So now I want to talk about price, and I had contacted over 80 retailers who will be selling the Firefly Petunia. Unfortunately, I quickly learned that the Light Bio website doesn't differentiate between retailers and wholesalers, so I got some very nice emails from some of the wholesalers saying, sorry, we don't sell to the public, so kind of wasted a little bit of time writing those emails. But fortunately, I did get responses from 20 independent garden centers who will be selling this petunia, and they were great. I loved talking to them. They were so knowledgeable, and they gave me lots of information, and they were generous with it and positive, even when they were a little nervous, because this petunia, it's expensive for you to buy, but it's also very expensive for these retailers. They, it's a high price petunia and they have high minimums. This isn't one of those petunias that they can just buy 50 of just to try. Most of them had to purchase like 200 or 300 of them. And for a smaller retailer, that's a pretty big deal. Some of the big ones wouldn't affect them as much, but boy, it's taken a big risk. So a lot of them are a little nervous about that, but others have been pre-selling and they said their pre-sales have been going great. So, there's lots of, enthusiasm coming from them, and I really appreciate it. And I have to say, something came over me, because when I ended the video before about the Firefly Petunia, I was like, okay, I spent my money last year. I don't need a Firefly Petunia. There's no reason for me to get one. And then after talking to these retailers, I was like, maybe I should just get one. I mean, it would be kind of nice to have. And I realized that sometimes with gardening, it's not about the plant, it's about like the social aspect of it, and the fact that sharing this with other people just becomes really fun. And I think that's what a lot of these retailers are seeing this as, because a lot of them had said that their mindset is like, one, they want to be able to give their customers something really unique. Other ones had said that they're hoping that it brings in new customers to their business because they're selling something that maybe other garden centers are not. And then also some of them said like they're hoping that this might bring some new people to gardening, kind of what we were talking about with Rick, where there's a lot of people who are just find the allure of this glow-in-the-dark plant really interesting. So I really hope that those people who are just starting out do buy from an independent garden center, because they'll be able to talk them through it. They'll be able to give them information. And I think they're going to have a better experience than if they just order it online and have it delivered to their door and then they end up killing it and they don't know why. We want to get that relationship going. So I really did love talking to these people. So I want to give a shout out to all 20 of these garden centers that took the time. This is their busiest time of the year, and they took time to write me back, and I really appreciate it. And some of them really did give me a lot of information and were very conversational, and I'm so grateful for that. So let's jump right in. The price range for the Firefly Petunia is pretty similar across the different retailers. For the most part, a lot of them are selling like a standard 4 or 4.5 inch pot for about $30. So it might be square, might be round, might be short, might be long. There's a lot of variation in the pot size, but this gives you an idea of what the 4.5 or 4 inch is going to look like. Pretty standard size for petunias. Meanwhile, some of the other ones, places are deciding that they're going to sell it in either a 5.5 or 6 inch type of pot. So that's going to be a little bit more this size. It can really vary again, but I do want to say that if you do end up getting this bigger size, I will say it's probably going to be a container that you can almost keep it in almost the whole summer, even maybe for the whole summer. I had planted mine in an 8-inch pot, so I put one plant in an 8-inch pot, and it was fine in here all season. It didn't outgrow it, so there were no problems for me to have it in an 8-inch pot. I was able to keep it watered and fertilized with no issues. So if you get that bigger size, you probably could keep it in there, or you just bump it up a little bit. If you get the smaller size, I would say bump it up. It's going to do a little bit better in a little bit bigger pot. So now let's go to the map, and we're going to start in Pittsfield, Illinois at Eastside Gardens, where they'll be selling a 4.5 inch for $32. And then in New Baden, Illinois, Honor Florist and Greenhouse will have 6 inchers for $40. You can also catch them on YouTube at Honor's Florist Greenhouse 2390. And I love this. They're going to have a glow-in-the-dark party on April 28th, a nighttime event. People can come and they can see the petunia at night, and they're just going to create a little bit of buzz around it. So I love the fact that there's some social things happening. Wait till you hear what they're doing up in Alaska with this. It's pretty crazy. Then also in Evanston, Illinois, the Windy City Greenhouse has 4 inchers for $30. Allendale, Michigan, Countryside Greenhouse will have 4 inchers for $35 and have 8-inch baskets for $50. And Jared over there had sent me some pictures of what they look like when they're glowing at night. He has some in the baskets there, so you can see where they're at right now. They're at a good size already, so I think they're going to be really nice when it comes time for customers to start taking them home. In Troy, Michigan, Telly's will be selling 4 inchers for $30. At Wenke's in Kalamazoo, Michigan, they're going to have $40 for 4 inchers, but they're having a special pre-sale price of $30. They said they're down to only 25% of their stock right now, so they're planning to sell out pretty early. And over in Crivitz, Wisconsin at Sharkey's Greenhouse, that's home of Beat Your Neighbor Fertilizer, they'll be selling a 6-incher for $30. K&A Greenhouses in Madison, Wisconsin will be selling them in a 6-inch, but they didn't know their price quite yet. They got to see how they're growing and how much input they have into them before they determine the price. And then in St. Charles, Illinois, Heinz Brothers has a 4-inch for $30. Plant Haven Farms in Olivet, Missouri will be carrying them. They haven't determined their price quite yet. Up in Winter, Wisconsin, the Winter Greenhouse will have 4.5-inch for $47. They're one of the locations that are having success with their pre-sales. And then in Olween, Iowa, the Corner Market will have 6-inchers for sale. They haven't determined their price yet. And in Alvord, Iowa, Knobloch's Greenhouse has 4.5-inchers for $35, but they do have a discount for pre-orders. And Elk River, Minnesota, Beck's Farm will have 6-inchers for $30. Plant Perfect in Bismarck, North Dakota will be carrying it. They haven't determined their price yet. Mitchell, Nebraska, the Peaceful Prairie will be having 4.5-inchers for $40. And in Bloomfield, Colorado at Front Range Gardens, they'll be selling theirs for $30. Right now they're in a 4-inch, but they might be bumping them up to 6 because they're growing so well for them. And then at the Garden Spot in Sublette, Kansas, they haven't quite determined their price yet. Arnold's Prairie Greenhouse in Leroy, Kansas has 6-inchers for $40. In Bloomington, Illinois, AB Hatchery and Garden Center will have 4-inch pots for $39 and 6-inch pots for $50. Al's Garden and Home serves the greater Portland metro area, and they have a YouTube channel, Grown by Al, so I'd suggest you check that out. They're going to be selling 6-inchers for $40. And I had to save Wasilla, Alaska for last because they are having a petunia party up there. Oh my goodness, at Jacobson's Greenhouse, they'll be selling the 6-inchers for $45, but they got a lot more going on than just selling petunias because they're going to have an evening event where they have a special beer being brewed, especially for the event, for this cold glow in the dark kind of event. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I wish I was in Alaska at this time because I think it'd be just a fantastic time. And it sounds like they're really having a great attitude about it. They've already done a lot of pre-sales and they're looking forward to this event as well. So I want you guys to support these independent retailers. These people, I have not visited their places, but just from my conversations and emails with them, I think they are like top notch. So I'm happy to give them a shout out. Hats off to them for, I guess, taking the risk on this product. And even if you're not buying a Firefly Petunia, I'm sure they have a lot of other interesting things. So head on out to your local garden center and check out what they have. And hey, if they've got the Firefly, if it's the right thing for you, go for it. But remember, it's okay if you don't have one. There's probably going to be someone around who will have one. You can go pop in and take a look at the glow, right? Thanks for watching, everybody. I know this is a long one, and I appreciate you taking the time.